Performance Training PST, Day 10. Looking for examples. Looking for examples essentially means finding out what can help you become the best athlete ever with regard to your needs. In this sense, because we're dealing with high performance training PST, if you know you have a strength and or a weakness, you take a look at those two strengths and weaknesses, you maintain your strengths and you enhance your weaknesses. Now, let's say you get nervous a lot and you get anxious a lot and you're noticing that your performances in practice are a lot different than in your training, and you ask your coach what do you think the problem is, and you start to notice that some of the things he's saying are, maybe not what you want to hear, or maybe she's saying those things, but she maybe describes it as well. I think there's some things that you can work on yourself that you can really take advantage of. You have all the tools and ability physically, and your fitness level is really high, but maybe there's some things that you can work on with your mind. And, they may say it in a couple of different ways. They may say something like, well, you're a really good practice athlete, you're just having some challenges with the competitions. I think there's a gap. If you can practice and train the same way that you compete, or vice versa, if you can compete the same way that you train and practice, I think you'll have a lot more success. And because a lot of times, for the most part, coaches aren't really trying to hurt your feelings. They're trying to lead you in a direction and guide you so that you can get what you need. And what I'm suggesting here is, once we understand what we need, anyone, me as a coach, you as an athlete, or anyone in general, once we understand what we need, it's very easy now for us to go out and, look for the examples so that we can get help and get better at what we're actually trying to work on. In this sense, I'll give you several examples of how I started to look for examples, and they were able to actually lead me in a direction for change. And I was able to document actually what I needed, and that was a big part of it, just understanding, okay, here's what I need, now let me go out and search for it. I think back in, this is the example, I think back in 1998, or maybe 97, I think it was 97, because that was the first year I was a resident athlete at the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs. In 1997, the first day of practice, I blew my knee out. Now, blowing your knee out essentially is tearing your ACL or your acromion ligament, ACL. So I tore that ligament. Acromion cruciate ligament is the three letters that it stands for. I tore that ligament on the first day of practice. Now, because I did that, what the heck was I going to do now? I mean, now I was going to spend the next, little bit I know, the next 9 to 10 months basically rehabbing my leg and, working mentally to get me a place where I was in a completely different place. I didn't really pick up the mental portion probably till about 3 or 4 weeks after the initial injury. But what I started to notice was, I started working with a sports psychologist because I had a lot of time on my hands. The athletes were training twice a day. I basically was doing rehab, which was, that was my job at that point, to get my leg back to a place where I could actually compete again. But along the way, I started working with a sports psychologist, and she was starting to suggest, there are a lot of things that you can be doing on your own, essentially, and that's where I really began my search for high performance training PST. In other words, she suggested that I work on these exercises. She suggested that, I do a little bit of research. She suggested that, there are books out there that can give you more information than I'm actually giving you when you're not with me. You can, look for examples of how you can make yourself stronger in the areas that you need, because they may actually be your weaknesses. Now, when she sort of suggested that to me, it hadn't dawned on me. It hadn't dawned on me that there are things that I could be doing on my own outside of the practice room. She gave me some specific exercises, and I saw this person, the sports psychologist at the Olympic Training Center, probably once a week. I'd say over the next, year and a half that I was there. I stayed at the Olympic Training Center for 2 years, 1997 and 99. But about 9 or 10 months of that time was spent doing rehabilitation because I couldn't wrestle. That was, slightly depressing for me. So that kind of changed my whole motivation for why I was there. My motivation for being there now was to absolutely get back to where I could compete And the second portion of it was to, strengthen my mind much more than I had done before. Now, I guess the caveat here is I had torn my other ACL, I think my senior year in college. That would have been probably a 2 or 3 year gap between me, tearing one ACL and tearing the other one. So I understood what it was going to take for me to get back to training again. The difference here was, and this is where I think when you start to look for examples, you can increase your ability to do a bunch of different things. The difference here was my recovery time was a lot better. I think a portion of that was because my mind was a lot stronger, partially because I'd already been through the surgery, and partially because I started reading volumes of books on mental toughness, psychological skills training, things that were going to help me understand how to develop my imagery to the highest level, videos that actually displayed how you can work on these exercises and create documents that are going to, help you in the direction for change. And this started all because the first day of practice I couldn't basically, be a resident athlete like I thought I should be, because I was, basically a hurt athlete at that point. One of the other key points, I think, so that's part of it. The other key point was one of my resident athletes, and we lived basically in the dorms, teammates. He was actually on the Greco-Roman resident athlete, but I called Team USA one big team because at that point, there were probably 9 or 10 different sports training in Colorado Springs. Anyhow, he was a younger athlete. He was like 17 or 18, and at that time for wrestling, we didn't have any 17 or 18-year-olds training in Colorado Springs. So this guy was a high school senior, and he was training. Anyway, he actually gave me a book. He'd come into my room every night. On Friday nights, typically the older athletes, they'd go out and go to the movies or go socialize or do whatever. Well, he's 17 years old. He couldn't do any of that. So he would come in my room and he would hang out with me. Little did I know that was like a huge lift for me, because nobody was there. It was pretty lonely there, but I would talk to him and he would tell me about what was going on with him. And I'm suggesting that's another way for you to actually grow and develop. You can look for examples of people that may not be able to do what everybody else is doing, and now you can get some information for them. So from that standpoint, this guy actually gave me a book, and it was essentially like a self-help book. And then that kind of opened up my eyes too. So now I had gotten information from a sports psychologist that said, there's a lot of different books out there that you could be reading, and you could be, helping yourself develop your mental skills and develop this psychological skills training, all the stuff that I'm talking about. So that was example number one. Example number two was a fellow athlete basically said the same thing. And he led me on a track, and I'm not the smartest person in the world, but I'm suggesting that I got basically two references that basically said, hey, there's a lot of stuff you can be doing on your own to help yourself actually get better. So that second sort of recommendation led me on the journey of really, at that point I wasn't a reader. But after that point, because I had a lot of time on my hands, I became a reader of self-help books, motivational books, psychology books, psychiatry books, and then I also found, there was at the Olympic Training Center, there was like a library, so you could get all sorts of videos and really develop that ability to. As a coach, that's where I really started pouring into the videos. So I guess the third example is, first two examples are, people recommending books for me to read, and then that started me on a path of really strengthening my mental, psychological skills based on references and based on examples from the different books, self-help books, motivational books, any kind of book that actually is going to, expand your knowledge base for your mind is going to help you. So the point is looking for examples outside of your own brain, looking for examples that are going to, people that have actually done it before, and you can use those examples that are going to help you move forward. The third example that I'm suggesting is, again, when I became a coach, I was a coach at the United States Olympic Training Center the same sports psychologist, basically said, Shannon, we've already had this discussion before. She said it in a nice way, and she's just like, I know in the past we've been talking about all these different books. I know, you're really, keen on that, and I think you're a really good student of sport, and you're really good, with the athletes. But there are other resources out there that you can search for too. There's videos. There's all kind of people that you can be talking to. Like she's like, where are you right now? I'm like, well, I'm at the Olympic Training Center. Well, who's the coach of that sport, and what did they do? And there at the time we would have these Olympic Training Center training camps, and there would be Olympic champion athletes, there'd be Olympic champion coaches, and she was suggesting that, and not only can you use the Olympic Training Center library with the books and the videos and the resources there, you can go talk to some of these athletes that have won and, see how they're doing it. You can go talk to some of these coaches that have been to the Olympics and that have been to the World Championships and have, coached some of the athletes to the highest level. She was suggesting that, when you're at the Olympic Training Center, there are a lot of different resources beyond the references that I've already given you, and you have to take advantage of those. And I'm sort of suggesting to you that there are a lot of pieces of information that if you start to look for them, those examples will actually help you build your knowledge base for high performance training PST and or high performance training psychological skills training. Now, the idea behind this is you're becoming self-sufficient, right? You're becoming a self-starter. You're becoming someone that's going out there and getting what they need. And essentially, I think that's a big part of developing responsibility so that you can move forward. In the USA, we spend 12 to 13 years in an academic setting ultimately to help us prepare so that we can become very good, productive people in society. I'm suggesting that along the way, if you're an athlete or if you're somebody that wants to get to the next level, there are a lot of different things outside of the academic setting that can help you. The only way that you're going to figure out what those things are is to decide what your strengths and weaknesses are. And you may be able to get that from a coach. You may be able to get that from a fellow athlete. Or you may be able just to be able to become aware of, okay, these are some of the things I need to work on. Now, once you understand that, now, if psychological skills training is something that you feel is needed, and I'm suggesting that everybody needs it. I don't care where they are. I don't care if they're at the top of the rung of the ladder in terms of high performance training or the middle or the bottom. Wherever you're at, you can always get better, right? And that's a concept that I don't know if I've really ever talked about it, but I think there's a way and then there's a better way. So wherever you're at with your ability and your strengths and your weaknesses, your strengths, you always want to maintain them, and your weaknesses, you always want to get them better. So remind yourself there's a way and there's a better way. So you're constantly looking for examples of how you can move forward your ability to get what you need to perform at the highest level. There needs to be some consistency, so you're not, consistently always changing all the time. I think you need to give things 2 to 3 weeks so that you learn how to do them proficiently, and then I think you need to spend another 3 to 6 months where you're actually really developing that ability, really enhancing that habit so that it can become something that's ingrained. And you can use books, and you can use videos, and you can use coaches, and you can use athletes, and you can document everything that's going on. So you're essentially, working on all the psychological skills training that we've been talking about, and you're noticing and you're becoming aware of, I'm actually getting better of doing this because this is one of the SMART goals that I've been working on with my coach and myself, and I know how to actually get better. Other ways to look for examples. Frequently, I mentioned this before, there are all kind of events that are going on with other sports. I'm saying I mentioned this before, there's a whole nother information piece called Coach Shannon Talks, and on there I talk about media training. I'm going to just talk about that a little bit right now because there's a carryover. In other words, you can look for examples in other sports and other championships, Olympic Games, World Cup, World Series, whatever, on television and the internet for the most part. There are all sorts of interviews that are going on. You can pay attention to those interviews and you can listen to what the athletes are actually saying. A lot of times they'll interview the athletes and the coaches. Here, I'm suggesting that you can be looking for examples of what the people are actually saying and listen to them, right? listen to your coach, listen to other athletes as you're, in training every single day, and start to become aware of, how are they, what are they thinking about? What are some of the things that they're consistently saying? You'll start to notice a pattern after a while. If you're really, paying attention, you'll start to notice that most of the athletes that are consistent, have strong minds. Most of the athletes and coaches that are talking about championships and they've been consistently at the top, they're always suggesting that, there's a system that we're using, and part of it is we're developing a high ability to achieve because we believe. We believe in ourselves, we believe in our ability, and we do the same things just about every single day. I'm suggesting that to become the best athlete that you are capable of, not only do you need to have the physical and tactical and strategical skills down, you also need to have the skill set that I'm calling high performance training, PST, and you can look for examples in books and videos and athletes and coaches, and then of course you can use the internet and TV to watch and listen to people as they're giving interviews and pick out specific pieces of what they're saying. Sometimes the things that they're saying are motivating. You can write those things down. Man, that's something that I want to be. I want to become just like that. And then again, going back to the first 3 or 4 examples, look for the books and the videos and the other resources, coaches and athletes, of ways and or how to enhance that ability. Notwithstanding most of these talks we've been having here, you can go back and listen to these again and again and again, and these are going to actually help you develop your psychological skills training. And then if you, of course, use those examples too and become consistent with them, you will develop and enhance your ability to become a high performance training athlete that has a high level of psychological skills training.